Hey guys, this is Ervin from IronWillStrength podcast, and on today's episode, we will be talking with Rožnjik Ervin, weightlifting coach, on everything weightlifting, programming, periodization, nutrition, recovery, and so on. If you find this content useful, hit the like and subscribe button to help the channel grow. Thank you. Okay. Without further ado, we will start and continue our today's podcast with the North Serbian weightlifting team's coach, who is also one of my old training partners and is an astounding coach right now. He is Rožnjik Ervin. And well, start out this podcast. What made you choose this path as a weightlifter, as a trainee, and as a coach?
I just want to say hello to everybody who is listening to us. It's a good question. I am not sure what I choose that path of weightlifting, but I'm sure. My father was a former weightlifter, so maybe he made some influence on me unconditionally. So I'm not sure, but yes. I choose that path and I very like it, and it's almost 20 years in weightlifting right now. So,
and what made you choose to be as a coach and not, so to say, a ordinary personal trainer?
Why I choose to be the Olympic lifting coach?
Yes.
I basically think this is a true love about the weightlifting and the strength trainings. And I worked at some time of some period of my life in a personal trainings and some commercial gyms, but I tried, but I don't like it that much. I'm much more like the professional environment and work with professional athletes and the special weightlifters. And that's a bigger motivation for me to work with athletes.
And at what age did you start out with weightlifting? And did you have a prior sport background?
Yes, I have some sport background. I tried wrestling, for example, but it's a short period. I think maybe 6 months, and some other sports, but nothing seriously. And I started, I think, when I was 13, weightlifting, but it's just to do something, not that serious. I think at 15 or around when I was 15 years old, that was the moment when we decided to make it in a much more serious level.
Yes, and in your personal experience, was that a sweet spot to start out the sport, or would there any general preparations before starting out with weightlifting that would be beneficial? Because in how I see it and how I think of it and look at the Chinese official Olympic weightlifting team, that I think they start out with gymnastics at a very, very young age, and they build up all the mobility, flexibility, and general strength, following up to concrete weightlifting.
Yes, that's true. And professional sport in a modern time is always try to involve the kids as youngest as possible. So sometimes it's around 6, 7, or 8 years old kids start weightlifting with before general preparation in some other sport. And a good example, the Chinese Weightlifting Association, one of the strongest, biggest, and the best organized weightlifting association or federation in the world. And basically, it's very good general preparation is in gymnastics or track and field, the athletics, it's very good. For example, Luke Siayun, who was a famous weightlifter, was a track and field athlete when he is very young. But you must know that the Chinese is very professional, so they have a scouter coaches who is scouting around the country and trying to find out the best talented athletes, and not just this. And they attach their kids to the weightlifting schools, so it's a very, very professional environment. And this is one of the biggest reasons why the Chinese athletes that's successful.
Very, very, very good. And what was your training as a competitor, or so to say, how was your success with that type of training that we did with our old coach?
Yes, we basically do I think a lot of activation of central nervous systems and a lot of high intensity lows. I think that it's all the Soviet systems, but not at all. Our old coach has some his why point of weightlifting, which some part of this I agree, some part of this I disagree. But that was successful. But I think so that some mistakes in the dash programs, that too high intensity all of the time, and there was, some serious injuries, and it's not that safe. So we must have a long periods of and periodization we will speak about. It's a very, very important thing in sport at all.
Yes, because the other day we also talked about the old coaches' training methodologies, but the main problem was, I think we talked about that volume and intensity wasn't actually well organized, because intensity in all the technical lifts were actually always really pretty high. The squat volumes weren't always, how would I say, beneficial for an active recovery standpoint, because mostly we did heavy fives. I think most of our training was actually looking like starting strengths, 3x5 or 5x5. The only main problem is that our recovery wasn't even near us, so
yes, not recovery at all.
well, actually pretty zero, and especially when we went to training camps. So well, speaking of periodization standpoints, what does your main periodizations look like? Do you program in a block fashion where you have multiple months of, well, higher volume, lower intensity, and followed up by that 2 or 3 months of higher intensity, well, and these separated with a taper block? So a little bit of introductory from higher volume to a higher intensity.
Yes, basically, we use, and I use the longer time of periodization, and it's always at least of 9 weeks, never below the 9 weeks, but it's a very short. So I think so much longer. This is the shortest, and it's always depend on the competition schedule. So it's always depending on our federation competition schedule, on the international federation's competition schedule. So, for example, Tamas, our athlete who is want to compete in Paris in 2024 in Olympic Games. Right now we have in April qualification period in Armenia. So we have 3.5 months. So we starting tomorrow. So 3rd of January we will start the long time preparation. And when it's a winter time, we always, because it's no competitions, they are always working much more on basic general preparation and basic strength, and not that specific strength. So not that much technical exercise, not that much snatches and clean and jerks. And of course, when the competition is nearly much more technical and activation of central nervous systems. So I made a basic periodizations, and it's always depending on the schedule. And but I mostly like to make at least 2 months. 2 months, it's somewhere perfect, because we have competitions, big competitions in 2 months. So this is the basic periodization length.
And as a coach, would you sacrifice a bigger portion of the year to add more volume training to, so to say, reap the benefits more of that volume and add that added work capacity? Or would you select a few competitions where you actually prepare, train for that, and maybe throw in a couple of volume blocks in between these more important competitions?
I mostly always pick up the most important competitions. So basically, for example, that athlete, but as I say, he's preparing for Olympic Games. So basically, he could have 2 serious competitions in a year, and that's this, not much. He's a senior athlete, but it's totally different for example, younger athletes, junior athletes, or under 17 athletes. They have very fast recovery, so they can prepare much more competitions. But we have these not that important competitions between the big ones. So in that competition, we do basically trainings. And for example, before the big competition, you have programmed deload sessions. And before that not important competition, we don't have deload. So there is an example last year. We do 5 sets of 5 squats in a Friday, and Saturday we have a competition. So it's totally crazy, but that competition is not important. So we're basically going just to do something.
Yes, yes.
But basically, it's very interesting and important in weightlifting. All of the scientists and then the world-class coaches, when you read, always they speak about the median is about around 80 to 85% of intensity. So basically, the longest period is working around the 80% of intensity.
Yes, because at the main technical point, I think that neurological adaptations in a technical aspect or point is the sweet spot, but you also need to take a how would I say, an RER approach, where you actually look that he doesn't max out even at that percent. More or less, he or she will leave 1 or 2 reps in reserve for that lift, because well, as you know and as I know, that following that all day, all maxing out point, your CNS just gets fried to hell.
Yes, that's true. And then somewhere in for example, you made a good preparation blocks, so you have hypertrophy and you have a muscle mass. You are stable and strong, and after that you can manage at 80% to correct the technical movement, to got some speed in movement, to make it as it need to be made before the highest intensity is 90%, which period is very short because it's dangerous. So it's just to adapt, to have adaptation in the central nervous system, and deload and you prepare to the competition. And sometimes I think that coaches made a mistake that's working without this basic preparation because don't have enough time, or just they are lazy. Sometimes I find that, or not enough that other part of 90% of intensities, of higher intensities. So for example, for athlete who is starting weightlifting, he or she need some his program is much more specific, much more snatches, clean and jerks, because they're learning the technique, not that much of other exercises. And as you got a much more serious athlete and much experienced athlete, he or she need a much more specific and individual program. It's very important. It's an individual sport, so we can't do one program for all of athletes from the
Yes.
youngest to the and any same age group. There is the differences between athletes 1 or athletes 2.
Yes, and as you said, that the technical aspect of our weightlifting training is that technique always needs to be refined. You need to always find that sweet spot where you aren't doing much, where it's not too heavy, not too light, but just to do the movement over and over. It's like well, the typical programming for greasing the groove, where a movement, let's say push-ups, tend to be daily, but it's not always at how would I say, higher intensity, where we could see it as even having 5 reps in reserve, which is actually very low. We're just doing it often throughout the day, so that we can learn how to be neurologically more efficient, so that we actually building up work capacity while refining technique. And I also see it in these volume blocks, where technique is kicked back a little bit, around 50 to 60% of the workload, and the reps are also low, but maybe we are compensating that with more sets overall. But the technique is still being learned over and over, and it's being refined. And actually, that's what an important part of these volume blocks as a weightlifter, if I understood you correctly, that technique is always in the program, but general strength plays a bigger role. That heavy or more voluminous squats, deadlifts, overhead presses.
Yes, tools example for some other exercises, but as you say, it's a consistency. So very important, maybe the most important thing in a sport at all, that you must be consistent. So if you want to be you want to have good technique, proper technique, you must work on it in consistency. And for example, when you got some muscle mass, some hypertrophy, your muscles are bigger, your technique is changing, and you're losing some efficiency. So we go back and working on technique constantly to not lose the efficiency, because your point of balance is changing if you've got some weight. So everything is changing always. And it's especially specific in a young athlete who is going taller, bigger, much more muscle mass, changing the mobility of the body. Everything is changing, so you must consistent working on technique to be successful. And after all, we are competing in a snatch and clean jerk, so it's the most important one.
Yes. And how do you think that nutrition and recovery play a role in this? How important do you think of it, especially sleep?
It's very important. So it's one of the biggest mistakes. What it's hard to explain to young athletes, because they are not that serious about these other factors of the successful athlete. But the nutrition is very important as in any sport. So the macronutrition is very important. And after the resting, the recovery, the deep sleep, if you don't sleep enough, the cortisol is working too high, so you cannot recover for the another day. And about the recovery, for example, the most of the programs have programmed recovery. For example, heavy day followed with light day, but it's okay. This is what I can make, but you as an athlete must to be to have discipline, to take a rest, to don't put telephones on before the sleep because of the blue light. And there is a very important thing which is need your results, and vitamins and supplementation. It's important, and everything. Every factor must be perfected if you want to achieve the biggest results.
And in your viewpoint, what supplements do you think are beneficial for a weightlifter?
There are some supplements. I'm not a big supplement liker, but for example, creatine is very good for the muscle because of the adenosine triphosphate, the ATP. So it's working very well in athletes. Some minerals, multivitamins. It's good for athletes. Whey proteins, because most of the athletes is going to school. They are not all professionals and don't have enough time to preparing food. And in that case, it's important to have the amino acids in your blood. So that's I think the most important. So some athletes use it to use some BCAAs and glutamines, for example. But that's the basic things: the creatine, the proteins, and some vitamins and minerals.
Yes, and I actually looked a couple of researches upon BCAAs and and glutamine, and actually what the studies find that it's an actually waste of money, because all the amino acid profiles that come from whey protein are actually exactly the same, with, well, a fraction of the price being higher. So actually there is no real evidence backing up that BCAAs on their own will have a real triggering point in muscle protein synthesis. But, well, companies got to do what they do, so they can sell their products.
The supplement industry is one of the biggest industries in the world, so it's a good business after all. There is a lot of supplements out there that don't work anything. For example, the fat burners is the worst, I think. So you can basically buy a green tea and some caffeines, and the name was a hardcore fat burner. So it's basically you can drink just green tea and some coffees and
yes, because a lot of people don't understand that. Well, actually, they are just throwing up your heart rate a little bit more. You're getting a little bit of sweat on, but many of them actually hope to have local fat oxidation, which is never the case. Yes. Because there are no such things as getting rid of fat locally, because that's what longer periods of diets, calorie deficits are for. And whichever you choose, I mean, like, say, for example, upping my daily activity or actually reducing my calories further, that's purely an individual standpoint. Oh, and you also have you also do personal trainings for the typical well, non-competitor or just the typical gym goer. How would you say that? Do you program the same way for them, or you take a more subtle approach?
Yes, it's always depending on the individual. Mostly the athletes, the professional athletes must work professionally. As you say about the nutrition, I just forgot to say that that the caloric deficit is very important, and it's a typical thinking of weightlifting. And it's heavy to make a program for an athlete, for example, who need to cut the weight for the body weight category, and must have enough carbohydrates for the power and for the glycogen. So there is a very difficult to make the program, but it's okay. And about the recreational athletes or athletes for other sport who is working weightlifting is totally different programs. Not of course not the same like a professional weightlifter. But for example, I use it to use snatches, power cleans for all athletes who is preparing in. For example, I'm working with goalkeepers, football goalkeepers, or some other athletes, and the basic exclusive power exercises is the power snatches or hang power snatches or power cleans, and it's very very good for their reasons.
Okay, very good. And as you said, with making the weight class, how extreme would you let your competitors go? I mean, the general sense that 1 gram of carbs hold about 3 to 4 grams of water weight. So looking at all the researchers, that 50 grams of carbohydrates usually go straight right into the liver. And it's actually the last place which you will lose those 50 grams of carbs, but the rest is all in muscle glycogen storages, which I think is, depending on the individual's muscle mass, it's anywhere between 400 to 600 grams of carbohydrates. And if we make the equations, actually that's 2 to 2. Yes, around 2 to 3 kilos of body weight just in water weight. But all those glycogen stores that we filled in, and suddenly with an extreme weight loss factor, like say, for example, minimizing carb intake to near zero so that we can use all those stored up glycogens for energy, takes its toll on the body and on the mental state of the competitor. So how would you say that, how would you let your competitors, you should, do you talk to them before making a certain weight class, before a certain competition, that to start early, or take the risk and take it to the last minute so that prior training would be more productive? But well, the competition is actually a 50-50% that will he have enough time to recharge his stores before the lifts, or just take it all in?
Basically, we always trying to start dieting a long time before the competition. So with a low calorie deficit and with the healthiest way to lose the weight. For example, if you have an athlete who have 20% of body fat, it's no problem. So just regulate the nutrition, and it's going to be good. But there are some athletes who are basically have. I had the athlete who have around 9 to 10% of body fat, so it's very low body fat, and must lose 2 or 3 kilograms. In that time, I not think that much about the carbs. We go start lowering the carbs, but then we do mostly the water cutting. So 3 or 5 days before the competition, we start water loading and go up with the water around, at least in a last competition. One of my athletes he needed to lose from 64 kilograms to 61 kilogram, and with not high body fat percentage. We going up until the 7 liters of water a day. I think one day in 8 liter maybe. So and the last day we don't drink any water. So, and we can lose in that method. Our athletes losing between 1 or 2 kilograms. Around up to 3% of body weight you can lose with the water without any drop on your performances. So when in a day of competition, you must hydrate yourself with some hydrating drinks and some minerals, some magnesiums, some other things which is important for hydration, and but not losing the basic power. And it's not about too low carbs because of the concentration and then everything else. But there is an example for you about athletes who try to lose weight with a keto diet and then ketosis in weightlifting. But there is I'm not sure about. I don't like it. I don't like the keto diets for Olympic lifters. But there are some athletes who use that diet, and they speak that for them it's good, but we don't use it, and I don't like it. So we much more about water loading and water losing, and that specific time if we don't have enough time to regular dieting.
Okay, very good. And to wrap up this session, what are the main core supplement lifts to work around with the snatch and clean and jerk. I'm like, what are those exercises that are typically mandatory for further development?
I like to program lots of pulls, for example, snatch pulls, clean pulls. In my blogs, there's tons of pulls and pull variations about just, for example, in the snatch pulls, or just snatch extension, or snatch deadlifts. That it's all kind of pulls, and I think it's a very, very important to have a strong pull, strong band, and strong trapezius muscles, and for good extensions. So I think it's very important. And some other things, for example, I very like to do stability in a snatch. So overhead squats or snatch balances, it's a must to do for snatches. So you must have some kind of overhead exercise for a snatch, because you will lose the snatch. In a good snatch you lose because of not enough balance in a squatting bottom position. And for the jerk example, I very like the programming the push presses, starting with legs and extend the elbows up. So, and much more like, but for example, I don't programming strict presses or just on some preparation period, but in the competition period, I don't programming any presses at all. I think maybe for some individual athletes who have very weak upper body, but mostly I don't like it. But I really like to do some bodyweight exercises, like Chinese athletes, for example, push-ups, pull-ups, weighted rows for upper back, hip hyperextensions, for example. That's exercise. It's give you the core stability, and the core stability is a very important planks or abs exercise. We do abs in a lot in our preparation period for session.
Very good. Well, thank you for the talk. Thank you for the session, and I will hope to have you on the podcast again. Maybe next time this month. We will arrange a meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
See you.
See you.